Welcome back to Students Diary once again. This is Abdul Rahman, and today we will discuss about types of cell signaling. There are basically four types of cell signaling. One is due to direct contact of the cells. Second one is paracrine signaling, and third one is endocrine signaling. You must have been familiar with this endocrine signaling because it's most commonly discussed. And fourth one is the synaptic signaling. uh, Mostly the direct contact is basically when in this case the cells are very in close contact to one another, and there are basically gap junction between them through which they are basically direct communicate. So that is direct cell to cell communication. And basically this type of signaling is mostly present at embryonic stage or in early development of the fetus, because the cells directly communicate with one another and they establish the organs or the tissues, so that information they are transferring from one cells to the another. Second one is the paracrine signaling, or we also called as neighboring signaling, because the cells which are present in close contact, close proximity, or in the neighbors of the one another, they usually contact through a certain release of the signals, and that signals are usually short lived, that is for very short period of time. And such type of signals such as like nitric oxides, it could be gases, or histamines, the most familiar one. As we had seen in allergic reaction, the mast cells basically release this histamine and it affect the neighboring cells, which again stimulated and produce more amount of histamine. So in that way the allergic condition become worse. So that kind of signaling is known as paracrine signaling, and it also has a very important role in early development, as we had seen in direct contact. Then comes the endocrine signaling, and in that case, basically the organs from where the signals are released, or the glands from which signal are released, are basically transported through extracellular fluid, or we can say through blood in the vessels, and it will reach to the distant organs which are present somewhere else, as we had seen in insulin, where pancreatic cells, basically beta cell, release the insulin and it act on the hepatocytes which are present in the liver. So that is being transported through the blood into that site of organs, and in that case there will be specific signal or ligand we call. In that case hormones will be ligand, and there will be specific receptor on the receiving end, or the target cells will have certain type of receptor which will capture the hormones. It has basically role in intracellular communication, from organ to organs. It will communicate, or from tissue to tissue through blood transport system. Then the synaptic signaling is basically, it is the rapid communication system. It is very quick due to neurotransmitter and the long fibers which basically release these chemicals, and there are the target cells which will accept that neurotransmitter and give that response. So that is mostly for fast communication or quick response. So we will see it again by the animation, so that you could easily understand how these different types of signaling work. So first of all, direct contact. In direct contact, we had the secretory cells and we had the target cells, and in between that are the gap junction, and through the gap junction basically the signal molecules will move into the cells which are attached to the secretory cells. They will be present at close proximity to one another, and they will be in direct contact to one another, so that transmitter, that signal will go into that target cells and it will shows effect on the target cells. Then come the paracrine signaling, or we call it as neighboring signaling. So there are secretory cells which contains that kind of signals, and we had that neighboring target cells which are present around it of these secretory cells. These secretory cells will release certain types of signal which will be captured by the target cells, and it will shows its effect. As we had seen, we had studied that histamines are a nitric oxide basically working on the principle of paracrine signaling. Then come the endocrine signaling. Uh, of course, there will be endocrine glands which will release the certain hormonal signal into the blood vessels. You all know that blood vessels are present all around our body, and they are basically transporting these nutrients as well as signals in the form of hormones, and transport proteins are present over there. So there are a lot of things happening in these vessels. So basically that glands, when release that signal in the form of hormones into that bloodstream, it will be carried on to the target cells which are present at distant far away parts of the cells of the human body. So our tissues will be again stimulated by this signals in the form of hormones. Of course, that signal will have specific receptors in these target cells. If a specific receptor is not present, so that hormones will easily pass through that cells and will not picked by these cells. It will not show any effect on these cells. So it is important to have the receptor in the target cells which are specific for these hormones. Then comes the synaptic signaling. Synaptic signaling is basically we had a nerve cells, and in that nerve cells basically it will release certain neurotransmitter, and we had the target cells which will receive that neurotransmitter, and it will shows its effects. And we said that it is a rapid action. So these are neurotransmitters. When these neurotransmitters are basically picked up by this target cell, it will shows its effects. And it has that synaptic gap as well. That synaptic gap has very important role by transmission of these neurotransmitter from one nerve cells to in another. It has certain roles in our memory, to maintain our memory or retains our certain information in our brains. So that has a very important role in nerve transmission. So these are basically neurotransmitters which basically communicate this message to the target cells. So this was all about today's lecture. So we will see you in the next lecture. Till then, Allah Hafiz.